I'm a little bee.
If you'd like to contact the show, send us an email at liveonfourlegspodcast@gmail.com or get involved in the conversation on social media. Join the Pearl Jam Podcast community group on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at liveonfourlegspod.
Angry teenagers picketing a Sydney rock concert have clashed with ticket scalpers. The teens claim fans missed out on the Pearl Jam concert because scalpers bulk purchased seats to resell. Frustrated by government inaction, the protesters confronted alleged scalpers themselves.
I saw this guy sell a ticket and you handed him the ticket.
Yeah, no, it looks like your
I
ass.
saw you sell it. I saw you sell a ticket.
And everybody, I'm Andy Glitcher. On the phone line, our favourite promoter, Michael Chugg of Frontier Touring Company.
Hi, Andy.
Whoa, Chuggy. How are you?
Good, thanks.
What have you got to tell us today about Pearl Jam?
We've got some good news for Sydney fans, and I know they're all out there listening. We will be selling 700 tickets to the Sydney Entertainment Centre and 2,000 Eastern Creek tickets. We will be doing it this afternoon. There will be a limit of 2 tickets per person. The tickets will be available only from the Sydney Entertainment Centre box office. Each person will be given a numbered wristband to ensure they get a ticket. No one is to turn up before 4 to give everybody a chance. The tickets are $36.80 each.
And 4 o'clock today from Sydney Entertainment Centre is the place to get it.
Entertainment Centre only. There's no phone. You must queue up.
And away we go.
You're listening to Live on Four Legs, the live Pearl Jam podcast experience, featuring
Mr. Stone Gossard. Gentlemen! Mama Queen! Matt fucking Cameron in the drum. Mr. Boom Gasper! You can call me Al, you can call me Ed, you just fucking call me, why don't you?
Hey everybody now, welcome to Live on Four Legs, a definitive live Pearl Jam podcast. We are just about finished with our short little run of New Zealand and Australia this week. The last place that we will be Sydney, and that's how we are closing out the entire 2024 tour. Unfortunately, we've been traveling out there on tour with this band since May, and we've seen so much already. We figured out what this album is with Dark Matter, figured out what songs stick with us. We've found the songs that work so well in this era as well as it comes to just the rest of the set, the meat and potatoes of the set and what they've been working with. And it's going to be an interesting year to go back on because we really didn't have that same thing with Gigaton. So we got 2 more. And then once we get to about 2 weeks from now, we'll start to cover 1 show from every leg of the tour from this year. So you will get to see us do one of the Australian or Auckland shows, and it'll all be based off of your selection, but we will get to that a little bit later. Right now, let's focus our energy on pumping you up for Sydney because this episode is from 1995. This is the first tour that they did of Australia, and it's really them kind of going across the world. They did Asia, Japan, Thailand, Singapore, Philippines, a bunch of these places that a lot of them they never went back to again. But this kind of kicks off how they start things in Australia here. They did a bunch of shows on this run, like Melbourne and Perth and Brisbane and Adelaide and a couple of other places. But this one we chose because we needed to do something Sydney. And also I looked at the set list back to back and I thought that there were some interesting things that we could bring up from this show that might have been more intriguing than the next night, but who knows? Because maybe at some point in the future we'll cover the next night and we'll be like, oh, well, yeah, there's that. But until we do that, we have this one to run off of. This is the March 10th show, the first time that they ever played in Sydney. So let's jump right in. Randy Sobel over here, John Farrar over there.
Hello, hello.
So where do we want to start? Do we kind of want to do an overview of where we are thus far on the Australian tour? Do we want to move forward a little bit and kind of talk about this era of 1995? I'll let you kind of spin the wheel and make a decision for the next 3 minutes or so.
I think we need to talk about this kind of year and tour coming to an end because it's been a long ride. Think back to Vancouver. We were so excited to hear the new songs and see how it was going to play out. What's your take on it? You got to see some shows. What's been the arc of this year? Is Dark Matter on the up? How do we feel going into these last two shows?
It's tough to gauge, and I think that maybe Australia has been a little bit of an outlier from what they did in the States a little bit. Like, I don't know if we're going to get moments in Sydney where it's going to be like, okay, kitchen sink kind of moments, because they haven't shown that they've wanted to do that yet. And in some cases, I'm all right with that. I think the idea here is, and while we've had some good footage come out of this, we don't have the full spectrum of what the shows are until we get the bootlegs. And we obviously have the amazing job that Chris Warren and the rest of the guys have done on site for the reaction episodes. It's been brilliant stuff. But to take it all in and to really figure out what these shows are and to figure out the story of these shows, you really need to listen to them front to back and figure out like what they were working with, what that crowd was feeding off of. And it felt like they were very back to basics on this. And I say that as a good thing and not as a bad thing, because we mentioned it in the reaction episodes. This is a stadium crowd, upwards of 60,000 people that were in Melbourne. And they also have not been back there in 10 years. So usually when they go to those places, they're thinking, okay, pump these guys up with the hits, make sure that they're singing all the songs that they know how to sing and let us hear it. And that's going to get the band in a good mood. And I think at this point in their career, while they did shell out Grammy and Well Song at Ohana, I'm not sure if they're going to be a big deep cut band anymore. And I think I think it's okay. I think that's okay. I think they will have some that they will take requests on. I think they'll have some where they'll kind of circle back into rotation. This has been a big year. You should be happy by this. This has been a big year for In My Tree. I feel like I've seen it at least 3 times, maybe even 4, but I think definitely 3 times out of the 6 shows. So that's a song that seems to be implemented a little bit more, but that also takes the opportunity to hear some other no code songs. As it stands right now, I don't believe we've heard present tense on this current Australian run, but we haven't at this point in time. We don't know what the second Melbourne set list is like. So there's a possibility that they go back to that one on night 2 for sure. But there's some things that, yeah, you can say maybe that they should add in, maybe they could add in, but I feel like, I don't know if it's comfort zone or I don't know if it's just finally after all these years, let's listen to Stone and let's put together the compilation of the stuff that everybody's going to react to. And I said it again on the reaction episode, I'll go back to it. It's different when you're in an arena with 17,000 people and 10,000 people react to a deep cut, because if you're in an arena filled with 55 to 60,000 people and 20,000 react to it, that's a huge difference. So maybe that had a little bit to go into it, but I wonder what the future is going to hold with the Chaser song, so to speak. I'm wondering if that kind of is something that they kind of drift away from after a while.
It's hard to look at these years with like the benefit of hindsight. It's like we don't have it, but we can look at like album cycle years, and we talk about this a lot, where they've got these new songs to play. There's just not enough room, and you want to think like, oh, recency bias. Like, are some of these deep cuts, some of these album tracks going to disappear for a while? You look back to the short tour they did last year in 2023. We saw so many tour debuts every night. They were breaking out stuff, even going down through when they went through Texas, they were still breaking out stuff that they hadn't played. We'll just have to see if that comes back on the next tour, whenever that is. And like, we don't know. Are there going to be shows next year? We don't know. But I'll be interested to see what that looks like next year. Because like you said, Gigaton didn't really get the full cycle it was supposed to get. So now we have 34, 35 shows under our belt, and we're going to get a couple more after this. And like, we're going to have this whole cycle, and it'll be interesting to see when they come back. What does that look like? Do they go back to some of those, being more of that deep cut band because they're not having to do 4, 5, 6 Dark Matter songs every night? I'll be interested to see. I wonder if this is a localized thing, but you're right. It could be a trend. They are getting up into age now. You're not going to get Strangest Tribe. Some of these songs are going to fall by the wayside just because, we know that Ed's voice can't handle some things he used to be able to. So it'll be interesting to see. And now we're kind of at the end of this year, and we can kind of look back and look forward a little bit and see what we've seen this year and how that's going to translate to what we see in the future.
I think we're going to get shows next year. It feels like at this point, maybe there won't be a lot. Maybe it'll be just a little bit more than we saw in 2023. Maybe it'll be very similar to that run where they play like 2-night stints in certain places or something like that. But I think we get to see shows next year, and that will allow some opportunity to shuffle the deck a little bit. But I think you're right. And one of the things that I've noticed from some of the performances in Australia is that Ed had a hard time remembering some of the lyrics. For Just Breathe, the song that they've really been doing every night, that's a song that has pretty simple lyrics that you wouldn't think that Ed would just kind of get tossed up on. He got a little off track with it, I believe, one of those nights. I can't remember what the other one was. I think I had heard Alive that might have had a little bit of difficulty. Better Man, one of those two. Pretty common songs that he's just not putting together, maybe because there's just so much going on, and the mental capacity that you have when you get up to that age gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It's no easy task. That's why so many bands nowadays will have teleprompters, and it might be one of those things where we look at it, we're like, oh no, Ed can't do that. But you know what? At this point, you're 35 years in. When you get to next year, might have to get to that. And that might just have to be okay. Bruce Springsteen uses it. His shows do not get diminished because of it. It's just little things like that. How are you going to make sure that the stuff that you're supposed to be hearing every single night sounds A+? And also, what are other ways that you can implement stuff that you haven't been getting to make it easier for them? And I'm just suggesting it. I know a lot of people are cringing right now. Do we want to see it? No. But if it's going to help them, then I think maybe it's an option for the future. Let's talk a little bit about 1995 now. As mentioned before, this was the first go around in Australia, the first time where they got to see the Pacific part of the world. And they're getting down there, and the hype is massive. The hype was massive for them in the States at this point. And of course, it made it so difficult to get tickets in 1995 due to the TicketMaster walkout and playing venues that you had to get tickets in, like grocery stores and small record shops and places like that maybe had smaller capacities, or maybe they were like fairgrounds or stuff like that. But the demand was so high that you even felt it once they went overseas, because this show specifically, now sometimes in 1995, when we're talking about 1995 shows, I assume we'll talk about more next year because it'll be the official 30th anniversary of that tour. So there's some ideas going on in the mind that might take place when we get to it that next year. we talk about this, forbidden Vitalogy documentary that was shot, and it's all footage that you can find on YouTube. The segment that they have that this show is featured on features a couple of fans who were lobbying and were doing kind of a quiet protest about the scalpers that were really infesting the ticket market over there at the time, because they would go on sale and after an hour you could not get tickets and there were no limits on how many tickets that you can get. There's a moment where you watch in that documentary where they find a scalper and they're all shaming him and everything like that. It's kind of a great moment. And they set out to, like, here's our stance. We're going to stick with it. We have the band's approval on this kind of deal. And they were able to get 700 tickets released to this show after the fact, and with the limit being set on 2 tickets per person. So sometimes this stuff works, you know what I mean? And it's good to see that it worked down there as opposed to what could have happened here in America. But it was difficult to get tickets anywhere. I believe there is a scene in that where a guy is really angry, screaming at the camera. He's like, I paid $220 for this, and they won't even let me through the gates. Like, he's getting real mad at the whole ordeal. And that's how high in demand it was.
Yeah, and you wonder if that had an effect on them kind of acquiescing to Ticketmaster and going back to them for 98, because these weren't isolated incidents. You saw this kind of all over the place on that tour, and in that documentary you can see a lot of it. They have like some news footage and stuff too, if I remember correctly. But that stuff got back to the band, like the venues talking to management, and it gets back to the band, and they're just like, we're trying to do the right thing here. But in the end, who is it really hurting? You're hurting your fans who are trying to see you. And I think all these little incidents kind of added up and made them reconsider, knowing that they didn't get famously the support that they were looking for from other artists. Maybe that had something to do with it. Just like, okay, we've got to find some way to do this within the framework of what everyone else is doing so that our fans don't get screwed, basically.
Yeah, one of the other pieces of footage that's really interesting that came out of the Melbourne show, and there were a couple of Melbourne shows. There were a couple shows at Flinders, and one of those shows is pretty highly regarded. It was the March 17th show. I believe it was a radio broadcast show, so everybody were able to listen to that. That is a very, very early Live on Four Legs episode where I'm sure we butchered this era because we had no idea what we were talking about at the time. So there you have that. And thankfully, things have changed and evolved because that's what we set out to do. But one of the things that happened before, I guess it was the smaller venue, it was at the Sidney Meyer Center, fans were rushing the gates. Fans were rushing the gates to get in. The fans that didn't get tickets, I don't know if it was specifically due to scalpers or something like that, but the demand was so high that they all stormed the gates and they broke the gates down to try to rush the stage. And that's just something, even going back to this period of time. I know when you look at crowds in 1995, you don't necessarily think like, oh man, Pearl Jam's being real safe and they're really worried about safety, because it doesn't look it. But in situations like that, there was a situation that happened in Miami in 1994, very similar, where they broke down the gates and there were a couple arrests and some things happened, and it was very uncomfortable for the band. This is obviously tie into what would happen years later at Roskilde, where they would actually deal with a fatal situation. And it's something that I think that they noticed, and I wonder if that also went to the idea of like, okay, if this is the reason that we have to go back to Ticketmaster, then we're going to have to do it because it is a safety measure. If people can't get tickets and the market is flooded like they say it is, then we need to prevent things like this from happening so anybody gets hurt. So it could have been a myriad of decisions. And look, I think for about 3 years or so, however long it was for them to be out of it, I think they made their point, and they kind of, obviously nothing really came of it outside of like, look at where we are and look at history now. But I think it is important to note, and that's just sort of how 1995 went with the whole ordeal. So now I think we can jump into the show a little bit. These are going to be all songs that you know and love from 1995 and prior. So when we start the show with a three-headed monster like Go, you're already like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm in. Spin the Black Circle. How about that one? And the Last Exit. That's a massive first three to start with. Those three specifically feel like if you're going to give the crowd something to react to very early and really start getting the people riled up and getting the energy out there, you have picked the perfect three to kick this off. Go burns right through this set. I mean, it's very much a take no prisoners type version. We know what the song can do when it's in that position to set the tone. 1995 means they're just going to do that and come at you with full force on it. Spin a Black Circle, same way. You are able to feel the energy and feel it kind of continue to build, and again, the force, the impact that comes at you with a song like that. In that crowd down by the pit in GA, like, you can definitely feel the movement there. You can feel the reaction, and then Last Exit to kind of package that all together, another one where that is going to get you going. And this is not the best Ed show, I will say that, because this is, as he'll say, I believe it was after Animal, he was ailing a little bit with his throat. He was feeling sore throat at the show. But there's some moments where Ed just kind of lets the growl out because that's really all he has to elevate. So in these songs, it does feel like he's getting that elevation out there, even though it's really raspy, it's really growly, and you know what? It kind of blends into the identity of it.
Yeah, and Spin the Black Circle, I thought, was the one where you hear that the most. He just sounds like a wild animal on that one. But yeah, to start it off, I mean, Go, I mean, we're not getting through this thing without talking about Jack Irons. I'm surprised it's taken this long. Jack's rhythm on Go is flawless, like spectacular. He's playing with such an attack on it and like just a different rhythm to it. I think it adds so much to the song, especially at the end when Mike just lets loose and tears it a new one. But the last 5 or 10 seconds of Spin the Black Circle was just unreal. When Jack speeds it up and they go for that breakneck pace at the end, that was unbelievable.
Yeah, gas is on full throttle for the first three, and usually when you're looking at these set lists, you want to take the first song, spend a moment on the opener, but it really felt like these three together made for the opening trio at this, which is rare because usually you'll get Release or something to open up, and that you can kind of isolate a little bit and then start. But this starts, and really until you get to Tremor Christ, the fourth song of the set, that is your open altogether, and it probably takes about what feels like maybe less than 5 minutes, but probably around more like 7. But yeah, everything's moving. Everything is moving. So Tremor Christ and Animal are going to be the next two songs. Jack on Tremor Christ, I think, is a terrific highlight. It's just such a percussive song in this era. And I don't know if it doesn't make the same transition with Matt once you get to Matt versions of Tremor Christ. I don't know if it isn't more of a percussive song, but the way that Jack is able to let everything reverberate and just let it soar a little bit. Every hit is massive. Every hit is hard for a song like this that maybe mid-tempo, a little bit of an odder pace that he wouldn't have to do that on. This is right in the wheelhouse of where Tremor Christ really hits. Excellent.
I love hearing the bass on this one. You can hear Jeff's bass line really, really well. And just the way he's sliding up and down and making those runs sounded really, really good and just locked in with what Jack is doing. Tremor Christ is a song that I think Matt never really got a chance to get a feel for, because by the time he joined in 98, it had already kind of fallen off. Like, they weren't really playing it that much, and they've really only done it sporadically since then. I mean, the song's still less than 100 plays 30 years on. But Jeff on Tremor Christ, love it. And then talk about Animal, where we talk about these shows. There's been a lot of them lately where Ed is a little bit under the weather. Mike steps up and is like, all right, I'm going to put this show on my back and carry it for a little bit. Animal, just like during Go, Mike sends it to another level.
Yep, absolute highlight. Can't disagree with that at all. So after Animal, Ed says thank you and cheers. We've been looking forward to this one for a while. Thanks for putting up with my throat. I've had a really sore throat tonight, so I may need some help on some of these numbers. I'll just do my best and see what happens. This was the era where a sore throat could just make things sound more raw, as we talked about with the song like Spin the Block Circle. So the next three that we can package together are Corduroy, Not For You, State of Love and Trust. The very, very long intro for Corduroy that happens during this era is a nice welcome, and the very long jam on this too. And Corduroy in the solo is less known for being like a shred fest in 1995 and more for just letting that riff continue on and just building off of that and seeing where they're going to go with it. It's not Mike like he's going to go off on Go or Animal, as we just said. The focus is just how the rhythm can keep progressing and keep moving on until the end. And they did it really, really well here. I thought there was a lot of great energy on Corduroy.
The solo on Corduroy is not a song like Even Flow, like Go, that needs like a ripping, barn-burning Hendrix solo. It serves the song more to do something that's a little more melodic, that's a little more not reined in, because you can still let loose on a different solo like that. We know Mike can do that with anything, but these are the ones that really elevate the song on its own. I think it would sound weird if you just come out and just blaze through like a Corduroy solo in this era. I don't think it would have sounded good.
And that excellent transition to get to Not For You as well. Everything was just kind of working well at this point in the set.
Good transitions on this too, but in Not For You, the middle part, I thought when it gets really quiet, they bring it down. You can feel like the tension is just bubbling over, just waiting for it to explode. And there's an incredible Stone solo as well.
And I think even at the ending, the outro for Not For You was something that was a little bit more different than usual. I think there were some like little plucky notes that were being played while Ed is improvising something like, how will I finally find a friend? yeah, there's some different things that are happening here. And to close that all out, State of Love and Trust, we've talked about 1995 versions before where Jack really doesn't know, or he's trying to figure out his own place with the song, and the drum beats sound really weird. He's going a little bit too fast in moments. It feels like there's a half beat that's going on that is just a little bit too odd for the song. And this, he keeps it really more in the pocket and really doesn't start to push and speed up until the end. And I think that kind of helped this version out a little bit, because it was just a weird song for that period of time where they were just working on things, and especially this early on. I think we've heard versions from March and February of this run where it just didn't quite stand out. It didn't quite work, but I think he figured out what to do for this one to make it like a pretty recognizable, original sounding version of State.
Yeah, it's unique for sure, and the crowd really surges on it too. Like, they know it and they're excited for this one. You know, like you said, Jack, he teases going to the faster beat, like at the end of those, I think it's the chorus or the pre-chorus, where he'll throw, like I said, he'll throw that extra beat, and it can throw them off if they're not used to it, but they hang through it on this one. And the end, when he goes into that one beat, the one, oh, it's so good. I think it adds so much.
Even Flow and Daughter are going to be the next two that follow it up. And Even Flow, there was a show earlier this year that we did, and it was definitely 2024. I have a thought of what it could be in mind. I think it was a 1992 show, but I can't remember. But I remember saying that in that episode that there was something that I heard in the beginning of Even Flow. So it's one of these versions where, you know, the end stanza to get you from verse to chorus, that da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. They start the song with that. I remember saying on that episode, whichever episode it was, that I recognized that. I couldn't think of what other shows they've used it in. Now it's official, because that's one of the things that I said. I thought it was from the Vitalogy documentary, and the one that's in the documentary, I don't believe is this version, but it's the same thing. They do this version, and it benefits the song. Like, you get that intro, and it kind of alerts you. It's like, okay, I recognize that, because you don't hear that little piece usually before the song kicks in. It's usually like just in and go. Your brain kind of is like, wait a minute, that's familiar, but what exactly are they going to do? It takes you a second before you're like, oh, okay, it clicks in, and then the excitement, I think, is able to boil over a little bit more. And I love that they do that, and I wish it was something that kind of stuck around a little bit more, because it's just so unique. Think about some of the intros for songs that we've gotten in the past, like different intros for Corduroy, different intros for Immortality. It makes the song, and if you're savvy enough to be at the show and know that that Immortality intro is coming, then you're like, oh, okay, here we go. We're getting one of these versions. And it could be the same with Even Flow. If they wanted to go back to it over the course of the last like 900 versions that they've done, they could have made this one of these things where like every 7 or 8 shows they could have done it, but it never really stuck after this era at all.
Yeah, and I wonder if it was a Jack thing to be like, hey, give me something at the beginning of this to get a feel for it right away, because maybe he was having problems with the way they were playing it when they all come in at the same time. Could have been something like, oh, he was speeding up or slowing down, and he was like, hey, let me do this thing, and then that'll lock me in and we'll be able to get through it. It could have been something like that. But yeah, I agree. It just kind of throws you off just a little bit. It's just a little bit off the center to be like, oh, this is different. Yeah, this is cool. I don't think I've ever heard Matt do it after the Jack era, but yeah, I think it's really cool. I think it's just kind of something that you're so used to hearing Even Flow a certain way And then when they just change something just add a little small detail to it, like that little 2-second intro, I think it adds a lot to it. Also on this one, someone is using like a delay pedal at the end of this thing, putting some real effects on it. It was on Last Exit too. There was some effects on the guitar during that middle part of Last Exit. I wonder if it was the same person. Maybe Mike had new pedals or something he was playing with, but not something that you normally hear on Even Flow, especially at the end during that big ending part. But it was definitely noticeable, some noticeable guitar effects going on there.
Yep, that seems a little bit before its time for sure. Yeah, and Even Flow isn't just one where it's very standard. It's straight up, like you don't need anything extra when it comes to outside the solo, especially at this point. I think the solo is pretty cut and dry. So that's an interesting point to bring up. But Daughter following up on this, you can tell that Ed is ailing a little bit. There's the moment where obviously you're supposed to sing the rise above it and you're elevating your voice, and he opts not to do it in that. And just like little things where you can tell, okay, something is ailing him at this show. He's not at 100%, but that's all right. Everybody has his back. Everybody kind of fills in the role nicely on this, and we get a couple of tags here as well. First up is the WMA tag on Daughter. It's pretty stark. You don't hear any of the bass. You don't really hear the drums on it. It's just kind of a faint strumming from Stone. And then I think the second tag is really the one that I go back to here. It's Stuff and Nonsense, which is a split end song. We've kind of talked about this before, but what I've noticed is that a lot of people will, and including the bootleg itself and the way that it was labeled, it said that the tag was, I don't know about the future, which I have to throw this out there. That's the actual song lyrics of the song Stuff and Nonsense. And Stuff and Nonsense was also labeled on the song as well. So there have been moments where you look at the set list here and you look at some of the tags, and it's not a separate thing. They are the same song.
And you know that I love you. And you know that I love you. And you know that I love you. Here and now, not forever. I can't give you the present. I don't know about the future. That's all stuff and nonsense. Stuff and nonsense. Nonsense, nonsense. Oh, just a ball of nonsense. Fucking nonsense. Whoa, nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people thought it was an original improv. Split ends, not a very known quantity outside of Australia, most likely. And Stuff and Nonsense, I think, is just a song that not a lot of people knew. You couldn't go on and Google the lyrics as it was happening and be like, oh, I know what this is. People just didn't know. But yeah, I love the tag. I think it adds a lot to the song.
So following the two big songs right there, we're going to go three in a row right here with Whipping, I Got Shit, and Rearview Mirror. I think I Got Shit is really the talking point in my eyes. Whipping was a really awesome version. I thought the drums kind of lay out and the chords open up a little bit in that spot, like right as you're about to burst into every single verse and accelerate those verses. You hear Jeff kind of add in a little bass line that stands out too. And it's not going to be a version that they're going to completely go off the rails and it's an absolute bloodbath. It's not a bloodbath version of Whipping. It's deliberate enough to where the crowd is getting frenzied, but they're not trying to destroy them on this version of Whipping. I like when Whipping can do that, when it's a little bit more subtle. It's a little bit heavier in that aspect instead of just running the sprint. But I Got Shit, to me, is probably the one to discuss here because this is the 6th ever performance of this song. The Merkin Ball record has obviously not been out at this point, so people down there do not know what this is. They played it, I think, in Japan or in Singapore, one of those places, and they weren't going to know what this is. So the crowd is getting something that they're completely unfamiliar with. And really, at this time, you weren't showcasing no code stuff yet. Lucan had been debuted, but it wasn't in full circulation until just a little bit later in the year, I don't think. Just a little bit here and there. But even at this point, it goes back to like 1994, 1993. Those 2 years, they were really starting to think ahead even further. They wrote a song with Neil Young. They wrote 2 songs with Neil Young. Long Road didn't get to debut live until the start of the US run. That was in Casper, Wyoming. But this version of I Got Shit, it feels like it's at this raw stage where they're still figuring out what is working with this. And what I love out of this that I wish could have continued on is that there's a bit with Mike as the choruses approach where there's a little bit more of a solo that's inserted in those spots. And I thought that that was really good. I wonder why they decided to cut that. Sometimes he'll do a little something there, but it'll be something a little bit more specific. He won't have a little bit of a canvas to go off of. But I kind of like that. And again, the song is still maturing. It's very young at this point. They're seeing how the crowd is going to react to it. And of course, because this crowd's going to react to it, they're going to bring it to the States and they're going to react to it too. And then it becomes a single later on in the year.
You always love hearing these early versions of songs. It's because there's always like a nervous tension in the band on stage when they play these newer songs because they're not really sure how it's gonna go. Like it could fall apart. It just creates this really interesting dynamic of like, hey, this is brand new, and there's that element of like, what's going to happen? Is someone going to take off and go off on it and take it in another direction? What's this going to be, especially with a song that people don't know? You know, it's one thing when you hear the record and you hear the record 50 times and you're going to go see them. But like I said, this is a song that nobody knows. So I think it adds a really interesting energy on stage. And that's the reason I think you gravitate towards these early versions. Like, let me just try to channel that and let me hear like what that sounded like. It's always really, really interesting. But the crowd is into it. Like they're clapping all during the intro, like they've got it the whole time. But the moment that stuck out to me was Ed just adding so much vitriol on that shit. Like, I got memories, I got shit, and like you can tell he's putting some extra oomph and some extra feeling behind that one. It was really good.
To cap it off here, we're gonna close the main set with Alive and Porch, but there's Rear View Mirror in the middle that we should obviously get to because it is rear view fucking mirror. There's a moment where Ed kind of fucks up the beginning of the song. He sings the second verse within the first verse. And then in the second verse where he's singing those lyrics, you can hear him. He kind of mumbles something to himself like, oh yeah, that's where I fucked up. Something like that. So he's acknowledging it on the fly, which is kind of funny. This is a song where I've noticed a couple times in the 90s that he's gotten tossed up on the 2 verses a little bit, which it happens, but I think
he's trying to play guitar too. It's not he's trying to play guitar and sing.
Not something that he did a whole lot at the time. He's still figuring it out for sure. But the bridge was also not quite what we know of it today. It was still evolving and still blossoming. I think it kind of feels very similar to what they were doing with the extension in 1995. It was just kind of a little spacey, like allowing it to kind of just sit there before the bass comes in to really bring it back and get the high energy and the tension up. And yeah, it's interesting to go back on because now we know that moment in the jam is just gonna ride you until the end. Like, that's why the song is a set closer, because of that moment, because everybody can come out of that, clap their hands, sing along, and it feels big in the crowd. They weren't quite at it yet at this point, but it's still blossoming. I think they're thinking about it. What can we do to this to make this feel bigger?
And there's some interesting counter melodies on the guitar going on, and it sounded like it was Mike, because you can hear Stone doing the rhythm part, and Mike is doing these like off rhythm little guitar leads thrown in, and I think it adds like a little more angularity, if that's a word, or again, it's just something that kind of throws the song a little bit to the left, or gives it a little bit more tension. I think it's really interesting the way you can just throw in, like, this is again something I've never heard on Rearview Mirror before. Just decided, I'm gonna play this and see how that sounds, and like, it sounds really interesting. But the transition we talked about the transition from Corduroy to Not For You was amazing. The way they get into Rearview Mirror from I Got Shit is very, very good as well.
Live and Porch are going to finish out your main set, and Live had a little bit of a hesitation to start, and it kind of felt like, oh, they're going to redo it here, but they just progressed with it instead. It sped up at the ending, like almost to the point where the song loses a little bit of its substance. It didn't feel like it had that finality as it usually does. It just felt like they were trying a little bit too hard to out alive, and you don't have to do that. This is an era where it is seemingly starting to fall out of favor a little bit, where we've heard at times Ed say, I don't really know why we still do the song. It's not a story that I'm thrilled to keep telling, but it's a little off. But then it kind of feels like as they're finishing the song, there's another immediate transition here to go into Porch. It does feel like a little bit of that catches Ed off guard, and he's a little bit off on the intro there, as this is obviously the fast Porch kind of version. So I think that there's a good effort to tie these songs together, but if you have a legit sounding Alive where the ending feels the way it's supposed to feel, where Ed is right on the mark on that immediate transition into Porch, that could have been something really, really good. That could have been something really special from this show, as you were saying with the other transitions were, for sure. But I think the effort was there, but they just missed that mark with those. But finding a way that these songs can stick together, that's a good note for sure, because they weren't really ever used, especially Alive, to go into Porch. Not something that was done a whole lot. Porch was good, though. I really enjoyed Porch because for some reason, when they go back and they have that little dun, 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 and that's your signal of, okay, this is where it's going to transition to the end of the song. That didn't quite have the same purpose for this. Instead, they do that, and then the notes go from what feels like it's going to be like impactful to a little bit somber, a little bit sad. It reminded me, because the two guitars are going off, it kind of sounds like almost like they're wailing, like they're getting some kind of deep emotion out. And it reminded me of some of those harmonics that like Jerry Cantrell uses in Alice in Chains. It reminded me a lot of that. So Ed is singing a little bit of his improv bit. He's lamenting. Tough to hear a lot of what he's saying, but the main line is, we're so far away from where we came. And I guess when you have those two guitars like that. That must be something he's feeling at the moment. And he's like, all right, let's bring this all together. Let's take the lyrics and let's take the music and let's kind of bring everything together to fit a certain identity. And I think it worked out. I kind of liked it, but once the drums come in, you're taking us home, charges up, and then you're going to walk out and get a couple more songs at the end of the set here. But I thought Porch was very good from that standpoint.
Yeah, Jeff, I thought, was, again, outstanding on the bridge there, just driving that thing. And yeah, got a little bit of a darker feel to it, and Jeff can just simmer under the surface and just let that thing ride, just take it wherever he wants to go. That was very good. And then, yeah, whenever you get that, there's something, like, we know that from Atlanta, and I think they did that on Unplugged as well, maybe, but that's something that immediately kicks you in to be like, okay, we're in that era of Porch. It's the showstopper.
Encore. Let's pause for station identification. And this week we have a lot of people to thank. A lot of our good friends from down in Australia who have joined up to listen to the reaction episode. So why don't we start out by thanking all of them. Thank you to Brad Ridout, to Christian Martin, to Dave Kolatinsky, to M. Booker, Ross Tyson, Andrew Gargett, and Matthew Carr for all joining up on Patreon. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the reactions to the shows that you've been going to. As I mentioned before, I've really enjoyed what we've heard from the guys out on site. They've just been doing a terrific job getting people together and getting some good voices out on that. So yeah, thank you everybody for continuing to do that. And if you are in Sydney and want to find them, look for the Live on Four Legs flag after the show and you should be able to find them. Just go right up, talk to them. They'll be happy to have you on. And while I don't know at this moment where they're going to be, keep your eyes peeled to the social media groups like the Australia, New Zealand group on Facebook. We've been posting the flyers out over there that will tell you where everybody's going to be meeting up. So if that's something that you want to do, that is available for you. And we hope that everybody gets the opportunity to jump in. So a couple things before I really plug Patreon, I just want to throw this out there. I mentioned it earlier this week, again, on social media. There will be no Christmas exchange this year. It just wasn't the right year to do the gift exchange. Just some complications, and it's tough to put it together. I wanted a break from it so I could focus on other things. I got other things in mind that are going to come down the pike, so there won't be a gift exchange, but we are planning to do an end-of-the-year party at some point. I have to figure out how to get everybody involved since there are going to be no gifts, but we'll do something. I think maybe I'll have some of the tour footage that I took while I was on the road. Maybe I'll have some of that ready and maybe we'll watch that or something like that. I don't know. We'll figure something out, But just letting you guys know, because I know a lot of people look forward to that, but that's not going to be something that we do this year. Next year, we'll see where we're at, and maybe we'll change it up a little bit. So just letting you guys in on that and just reminding you, I know a lot of people look forward to it. So just not this year, maybe next year. And also, as I kind of mentioned before, too, I want to let you guys know that after next week we're going to be doing a 1996 show, but after that, the rest of the year are going to be shows from these tours. So the way we're going to do it, I mean, we can pick them and they'll be fine, but it won't mean anything coming from us because it's going to be you guys that'll vote for what episode that we should do for each leg of the tour that have happened this year. So we'll do one from the May leg on the West Coast. We'll do one from Europe, one of those European shows. I'm going to guess it's probably one of the 2 Barcelona shows that we'll do because you got 2 festivals and 2 shows that didn't quite hit the mark because of Ed a little bit and what was going on over there. So I'm going to guess that it's going to be one of the 2 Barcelona shows for sure. And then we'll do another episode on one of the September or August shows, like a Wrigley or MSG or Philly, Fenway, Ohana. There's a lot of really, really good ones to choose when it comes to those. And then we will end the year with one of the Australian or New Zealand shows. So the way that you can get in on vote on that is through our social media. We are on Blue Sky now, guys, because Twitter is a fucking cesspool. So we are now on Blue Sky. You can find us. It's live on Four Legs Podcast .blue sky .whatever it is. I don't know. Just search for Live on Four Legs. You can find us. I guess I'm going to have to re-record the intro at some point to add that in and subtract Twitter, which is really disappointing because Twitter was so much fun for so long. You know, we did the set list updates and, you know, obviously we can't do them now with Australia because of the time differences, but we brought a lot of people in and it was great to, you know, let people know in real time what was going on with the shows and interact with those people. And it just comes to a point where you just, even outside of politics, even outside of what's going on, you just can't deal with it anymore. So the Blue Sky community has been fantastic. That's where we're going to be. So if you want to come follow us on that, please head on over there, be a part of that community. And already, I think it's so much better. It's already so much better. So we'll do the same things. I think by the end of the year, we'll probably completely shut the Twitter down. We'll figure out what to do. But for now on, it's going to be Blue Sky. So there will be polls on Blue Sky. There will be polls on Facebook, and there will also be polls on our Patreon, which if you are interested in joining the Patreon, I know that, hey, maybe the polls won't get you over there, but maybe some reaction episodes will, because all of the reaction episodes are going to be there. They'll always be there. You can listen to anything from this past year that we have covered, which is everything. So the way to do that, the way to help out the show a little bit, and if you are interested in getting an episode request, and it's looking like at this point we could probably cover the rest of our episode requests for 2025, you guys. So we might be at a point where we can double up, where people who have gotten their request before can maybe get another at some point. I'm not promising that as of right now, but maybe that can be something later down the line for the future. But for anybody new that's joining up, that wants to join up on the $5 Giggle Leg tier or the $10 Horizon Leg tier, that is available for you and an episode of your choosing. That is what we want to do. We want to be able to cover your story, cover your show, talk about it, and put it in the books. Everybody has all different experiences, and that's the point of this podcast, is to focus on all of them. So if you want that, if you want to get your story told, the best way to do it is to head on over to patreon.com/live on four legs. Or if you like downloading apps, you can download the Patreon app and search for Live on Four Legs and click the subscribe button and do that. Or you can go to liveonfourlegs.com and click the become a patron button at the top. You just click the orange button and you join up. And that is that. You'll get every piece of episode, from the reaction episodes to evolution episodes to TV show performances to bridge school performances to just random shorter shows that we've done in their catalog. A lot of content's over there. I'm going to guess that there are probably about 200 episodes over there that you can sift through. That, again, it's endless. So there's going to be something for everybody. So if you want to do that, help us out, pitch in a little bit to our cause, help us keep afloat as a podcast. Do that by joining over on Patreon. And again, if you're going to join and contribute $5 or $10 a month, then you will get the episode request. We are looking forward to doing a good amount of them this year. So yeah, let's get them in. All right. So let's get back into the rock. So we're going to, look, there are going to be 3 encores here, technically. Even though there's only 6 songs, it's going to go Black, Better Man, and Blood to be the first encore. And then you're going to have some shenanigans happen in encore 2. And then you're going to have Indifference for an encore 3. And that's the layout of all this. But yeah, encore 1, that's obviously where we're going to start here. So it's the B section. No B girl, but Black, Better Man, Blood. And Black and Better Man for this, I don't know if it was because he was not feeling okay. And he even says before the start of Black, he asked the crowd, and he's like, am I doing okay? And the crowd responds to that. But I don't know. There was somewhat lackluster energy, especially for Black. It just, you hear, and I always make a point to say this in like 1992 versions of Black, that elevated, Some Kids at Playline, where he just streaks it. That's the unplugged version that we know.
Take a walk outside. I'm surrounded by some kids at playing. I can feel their laughter.
And this is kind of coming off of the era where he's not going to do that anymore in this version, but you listen to how he's delivering the line in this, and it's just dead. It just feels like it has no energy to it, and unfortunately, it just feels a little bit off. There's a little bit of a "we belong together" at the end. It kind of saves it a little bit, but it doesn't reach any bit of the magnitude that the song deserves to have. And then going into Better Man, you're just kind of in the same boat. It just felt overall kind of flat to me, unfortunately.
Black is interesting because it's not one that Jack ever really locked in on or figured out in a way that he was happy with. It never really jumped out as one that he stood out on. And it's too bad because it easily could have been, but if for whatever reason, maybe, just the fatigue of the 10 songs and, some things were falling out of favor. But when you look back on Black, I think the 95, 96 is not the best era for Black. And it would pick back up in a big way when Matt joined. But yeah, for whatever reason, these don't hit the same way as it did a couple of years prior to this, or as it would a couple of years later. But yeah, I'm with you. As far as Better Man, again, only the 11th performance. Still really early for a song that was premiered almost 2 years ago at this point in 95. To have only been played 11 times, that tells you, where they were at with it. It does get a huge crowd response, probably due to some radio play and things like that. But yeah, it doesn't have the weight and doesn't have the impact that it would later.
I think that's yet again a Matt Cameron. Once he's in the fold, once they add the tag, it starts to become a showstopper type song. And all this time it had it. It goes back to the disagreement on whether or not to put it on the record, that it might not have ever been something that Ed wanted to do. So when it got brought up, maybe he was a little hesitant on it. And there is a good version from this tour that I remember. I don't know what show it's from, but it's on that Vitalogy documentary, and it sounds terrific. But this one wasn't that. It was just sort of went through the motions, unfortunately. But look, you have Blood to pick it back up, and it feels like, okay, you're going to end with something that felt akin to what the main set was giving you. So we get some like reverberating stomping during this, and it almost sounded like the way that, when you shake like a wobbly piece of like sheet metal or something like that, because that's what that stomping sound felt like to me. It was pretty cool. The ending there, again, you want some good Jack performances here. There's a massive ending that bursts out of the seams that Jack really puts on the forefront for this version of Blood. This is a great year for Blood, obviously, and one where Ed can scream it, and you're not going to worry about how much power he has in his voice, like a song like Black, where he needs to use that. Maybe that's just not the best choice of song to place here, and they would do better once the years went on of shows where Ed was not feeling well. Okay, maybe we don't do a song like Black, or maybe he learns how to push through it better. But for Blood, I think he can kind of mask that a little bit, because all he has to really do is just use his rasp, and it's there.
Yeah, he's doing an interesting effect on his voice too. Almost like a little deep kind of like chugga thing with his voice, almost like Atomic Dog. They weren't really doing Atomic Dog at this point. You're getting more of like the fame tags and things like that, but it feels like he was kind of channeling some Atomic Dog stuff, and maybe that could have been the inspiration, because I think they'd only done it once in the early years, and then it came back in '96, and then it just popped in sporadically since then. But it almost had that kind of feel to it, like he was really going deep on like that, like that Atomic Dog feel to it.
All right, well, on to Encore 2. Now, this part isn't on the bootleg, but it is on YouTube, so thankfully we have the YouTube footage to go back on. I don't know why you would not put this on a bootleg, but I don't know. Maybe they just didn't have it available at the time. Who knows? But Ed pulls out a flag that says "Happy Birthday, Jeff," and I believe his birthday is on March 10th, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm not looking at a birthday calendar right now, so it could be the day before or day after. Who knows? But he says, "You know what you got to do when it's your birthday? You got to sit down, and everybody embarrasses you with a song." As per tradition, apparently Stone is the one to start it. So, happy birthday, Jeff.
Happy birthday, Jeff.
Then shenanigans come out. Then shenanigans happen. We have Flea, of all characters, come out with a nice looking chocolate cake that Jeff kindly blows the candles out on. And then, there's some discussion as to what happens next. It could have been one of these things where Jeff thought and kind of braced himself for Flea about to push the cake in his face. And Flea doesn't do it. Jeff actually, if you watch it, Jeff does it himself.
Yep.
Jeff lifts the cake and pushes it in his face. Right.
Yep.
Maybe to not get thrown off by what Flea was about to do. And that ensuing chaos was then them taking pieces of the cake and throwing it at each other, and throwing pieces of the cake in the crowd, and everybody's just laughing. And it's a chaotic, fun moment. And I didn't even really research why the hell Flea was there. I'm going to guess that the Chili Peppers were doing something, but also at the time, a couple days later, I think Dave Grohl played Rockin' in the Free World with them in Melbourne. So they were getting the best guests for 90s alternative at the time. They have them in Australia for this tour, apparently. So that's a fun moment. Ed always, whenever there's a cake now, he always chucks it into the crowd, and that's cause for a fun moment, and maybe one disappointed person that takes it and gets it all over their clothing, but it's fun. But after that, this is interesting, because we talked about this song last week, and I kind of said, all right, let's wait for this week to really give it its flowers. This is going to be the live debut of Needle and the Damage Done. So Ed and Flea. Flea's like, oh, give it up for Carrie. Give it up for Carrie working the monitors. And Flea says he's going to play a song for Jeff and all of his loved ones. So this really is just Flea and a bass guitar. And that threw me off because I thought, obviously, Ed's played this a small handful of times live himself. So I thought that if Flea was going to be included on it, then he would be doing some backing vocals or something like that. But no, this is all Flea doing it. It's interesting because, Flea's a tough guy to take seriously. So when I'm listening to this, the crowd's clapping along. He's got the bass scales running. It almost sounds like it could be like a jazz version of this almost, which is kind of strange, but it's weird because you can't tell whether or not he's legitimately trying to do a nice version, a nice rendition, or if Flea is just fucking around. Right?
Well, it doesn't help that he has
gray
chocolate
area.
cake all over his face.
No. But still, like, maybe it's because of who the Red Hot Chili Peppers are, especially who Flea is. Not somebody that's been seen as like this, serious type human being, especially when he sings, because there's a Red Hot Chili Pepper song, I believe that was on One Hot Minute, that's called P. And that's Flea's song that he sings. And it is in no way meant to be taken seriously. It's so tough to hear him and him like kind of do his like, because he sings kind of like a choir boy that cracks a little bit almost. And that's sort of, I guess, a little bit what I said about Neil Young last week. But the whole thing was just a lot stranger than I was expecting it to be. And I don't know why, because maybe with Flea, you shouldn't have those expectations, but I guess I thought that Ed was just going to play it and they were going to do something normal, but that's not what happened at all.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is the answer to the trivia question, which song was played at a Pearl Jam show when no members of Pearl Jam played on it. I don't think there's ever been another one that I can think of, but it's kind of short. I don't even think he does the whole thing. It's just a couple of minutes, just maybe does the first verse or two, but the video is because he does have chocolate icing on his face, but he's doing this really intense emotional song. So there's that juxtaposition of these two things, and you're like, you've just seen this chaos on stage, and then he's gonna come out and play this like really sad, serious Neil Young song. I mean, the guy's super talented. I mean, you've seen it in, Atoms for Peace and some of the other projects he's been in. We've seen the Mars Volta for a little bit or something, played with them. Like, the guy can play. He's an outstanding musician, but
It's not just with bass. He's a great trumpeter as well.
Sure. But yeah, it's just very weird scene to just watch. Just only in 1995 could this have happened. Yeah, it's really unique and interesting. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be just him either, but he does it justice.
So there is one other song that I can think of, and we covered it fairly recently. You weren't on that episode, but I believe the version of Going to California that happens during the House of Blues show in Chicago, where Robert Plant comes out to sing it, I believe that it's his guys that are playing on it. That it just happens to happen in Pearl Jam set.
No members of Pearl Jam. Okay.
I will go back to the video on it, but I don't believe so. I know of another. I just thought of another. Santa Barbara, 2003. Cornell does Like a Stone. And I don't think that any member of Pearl Jam is on that. I think that's
solo.
Just him.
That was Cornell's solo. Okay.
Yeah, I believe so. Okay. Somebody can correct me on that, but I believe that is just a Cornell solo on that. So weird to say that song has been played at a Pearl Jam show,
Yeah.
Not something that you think about too often, but hey, and while we're here at Needle, I'm going to make not one correction from the last week's episode, but I'll make a couple. So I had mentioned that Liam Finn had opened up and played a Neil Young song, and I was looking for what that song was, and I didn't find a direct version from that night, but I found that he had been playing Old Man around the time. So a couple people, and thank you for letting me know, whoever wrote in and told us, the song he played that night was Cinnamon Girl. So that was the song, and Ed would say, because he played a Neil song, I have to play a Neil song. So we played Cinnamon Girl in his opener set that night. So that I wanted to make that cleared up. The other thing I want to clear up is that I had mentioned the Cosmic Psychos, and I realized that I thought, because there were a lot of references to like rugby and Aussie rules football, I thought the Cosmic Psychos was a team. It's actually a band. And
that's a band,
They managed to open up for them this weekend. So when I saw them on the poster and on the bill, I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting, because I definitely had just referenced that name. So, yep, that's another one right there. And I think the other one that I would like to correct myself on was that there was a version of Brother with lyrics out there prior to Lost Dogs that had been circulated, and the Florentine's Garden version did have lyrics on it. So there was a bunch of things that I was wrong about last week. So thank you for everybody for correcting. This is, again, a podcast where everybody can be involved on. And if you're not involved, then these mistakes will just sit out in the open. So, all right. So one more in this encore too, and it's Let My Love Open the Door, which is maybe one of my favorite covers from this time period. And this is the second to last time that they would do it before the famous Soldier Field version that I absolutely love. This version was kind of more of a party train wreck. There were parts that kind of felt like everybody was just fucking around with the cake being thrown on stage. Like, that sort of energy is out there, and they're just kind of in like, yeah, we're having a good time here. We're just dicking around, and we don't have to take ourselves too seriously. So, yeah, it just felt like this version was them screwing around in the garage. And, there's parts like the bass comes in, that little and Jeff is supposed to like do something in the middle of that, and things were just kind of out of place a little bit. It was a little bit of madness, and maybe you call it a hot mess. It's not the Soldier Field version, but played up to, they've done thousands of versions of Baba where it's very similar to this, thousands of versions of Rockin' in the Free World that are similar to this, so it's the same spot, the same idea. So yeah, that's essentially what happens.
They were pushing it though. This version, like, it rocks more than the Townsend version ever did. Like, they're going for it on this one. It's fast and furious. There's a part 2 where you hear some background vocals come in, and it's those kind of high-pitched background vocals that, like, it could be Stone, but, like, it could be Flea. Did Flea stick around and come out and sing backups on this? I don't know, but it's... Yeah, but it sounded like
why would he
you
just
hear
leave
that,
the stage,
that
you know?
voice come in. Yeah, you hear that voice come in, and you're like, that could easily be Flea, because he and Stone sound very similar when they sing. They both got it in that same kind of higher register, but yeah, that stuck out to me too. Yeah, when they get to the end, they just completely tear it down. Yeah, this has kind of like that leaving here energy to it.
All right, after the song, Ed kind of awkwardly says goodbye and see you tomorrow. Not in the same venue, but in a different one. And the crowd is chanting for one more song. And guess what? They're going to get their wish with the elusive Encore 3. Ed then says, still here, huh? Thanks again for being so nice to a bunch of strangers from America. The last song of the night is going to be a very desolate version of Indifference. Just easy way to end. The crowd sings, claps along. This wasn't like an engaging, get everybody together kind of performance, but it wasn't a sinister, man, down on my luck emotion in a really dark spot kind of version. It kind of felt like a club version. In a crowd of a couple thousand, it kind of felt like they were playing it to about 300, 400 or so.
Yeah, you picture like 3 a.m., closing the bar down. Here comes Indifference for the last few people that are hanging around for last call, you know? Yeah, I get that.
That's how you're going to end the set. So now we get to pick a couple of songs here. We get to pick our favorites from the set list. All right, you're going to go first because I don't know what to do.
My number 3 is going to be Needle and the Damage Done, and the birthday hijinks with the cake and everything included. That was interesting and fun to watch. I think it's the only part of this show that's on video, so worth your while to go check out that 3 or 4 minutes. My number 2 is Spin the Black Circle, and my number 1 is going to be Not For You.
I'll go my number 3. I will go with Go. And then my number 2, I'm going to say is Porch in this. I liked what they were doing. I liked the kind of how the guitars were handling in the solo there. I like that kind of stuff. My number 1, I think I'm going to go with I Got Shit from this show because this was a unique version from a very, very early time period where the song hadn't quite made its mark just yet. It's just the early versions, and I really enjoyed what they put together for it. So, all right, a rating now. This is a 1995 show, which usually rates pretty high on this podcast, but this is also, to me personally, I don't think that this is the cream of the crop of 1995. So start us off and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, I just think even the floor for these shows is so high. I mean, this is a really good listen. There's something in almost every song that you can take out of and be like, man, that's really good, or that's really interesting, or man, like we talked about the even flow intro, the transitions between songs, like Jeff on a couple of songs sounds really good. Mike just tearing some of these songs a new asshole. Even the 10 songs, even kind of interesting, you know, an early version of Better Man, good version of Porch. Then there's the stuff in the encores, which is interesting. I can't go lower than a 9 on these. I still think this is a really good show and a really good listen.
I think that this is one of the 1995 shows where it doesn't quite click. There are good performances in this, but I think overall it's very short for this era. It doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of show-stopping moments, so to speak. Good performances, but not a lot of transcendent stuff in my eyes. But I think that being said, you can't really give it that bad of a rating. Like, I'm not going lower than an 8 on this because 1995 is still 1995 and those elements were there, but I think it just falls a little bit short of what they're capable of from this era for sure. I think there's a lot better stuff to go back to, especially probably from Australia as well. Okay, so that is that. I think next week we're going to be taking a little bit of a chance here. So I've not looked at the quality of this bootleg, but I feel like I've checked it out and I feel like it's okay. We are going to do an OTOTO country. Just something that's been on my mind. Like, why not do fucking Istanbul? Why the hell not? Because it's not Constantinople. That's exactly why you do Istanbul. So that was a place that they went to in 1996 on the No Code tour. And again, why the hell not? If we get somebody who was at that show listening in from Turkey, then that's amazing. And that would be great. But it kind of goes back to like what we were doing years ago when we did the around the world thing. It's good to get representation in everywhere. And that'll be sort of the buffer before getting into the stuff that you guys all experienced in the last year. So Istanbul 1996 will be next week. Constantinople, sorry, don't think we're going to do that anytime soon. But, you know, even old New York was once New Amsterdam. So anything can happen. All right. Thank you all for listening in. And if you are listening in for the first time, welcome. I hope we have made the good impression. We have lots of episodes to go back to in our history that I'm sure are at least one show that you've been to. At least one. There has to be at least one that you've been to that you can go and check up on. If you go to the archives on Spotify, Apple, even live on fourlegs.com, we'll have all the archives where you can go by year and look to see which ones we've covered. And we do that on Live Footsteps as well. So if you are not subscribed and want to find out what our next episodes are going to be for the coming future, if you didn't know that Istanbul will be next week, then you subscribed every Wednesday. You'll get the pop-up notification and then you're in. You can go and listen to that. So it's anywhere that you follow along on the podcast. It's Spotify, it's Apple, it's YouTube, all the big important places. And then if you want to help us out even further than that, help us out with a little bit of a 5-star rating that helps the show. And also leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Let the next person that's looking for their Pearl Jam podcast content to know what you're going to get from listening to this show. And that'll go a long way. And that's how you keep the train moving. Because if people read that, they're like, all right, this show has something for me. So I'm going to dig in. I'm going to listen a little bit and see where to go from there. So that is all that. And where do we go from here? Well, not Constantinople. I will make that joke until I'm blue in the fucking face. This may be the end. We're here, but not for much longer. And although we may be parting ways, miss you already, miss you always. All right, I won't make the joke here, but I will thank you all for listening in again. And next week, we will be done with the 2024 Dark Matter Tour. Sad occasion, but hey, we'll at least know what we have going for us going into next year, I suppose. So that being said, for next week, see you on the pod.
Happy very belated birthday, Jeff.
Istanbul.